All right, coming to you live from the Open Source Summit here at the J.W. Merritt in lovely Austin, Texas. I'm here with Brendan O'Leary. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So you are with GitLab. Let's start with what is GitLab?
Sure. So GitLab is a complete DevOps platform. And so what that means is it allows you to go all the way from collecting ideas about what's going to get worked on through developing the code and working together, through deploying it, and then observing it in production. So GitLab has tools for all of that as one DevOps platform that we deliver.
So that's probably news to some people who've heard about you but don't know a ton, thinking of you more on the front end only. How have you been building out as sort of as a tool chain?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Even having Git in our name, right? Being Git as a source control tool, and that's where we started life. Can easily make you think just about source control, which of course is the managing of all the files that are involved in creating a software product. Right? You can think of it as a bunch of folders of files together, and we're all editing it, and that would be chaotic. Well, a source code management tool helps you manage that chaos. Anyway, so that's how we started life, but then our customers, we would often find were large enterprises who wanted to host their own code and then wanted to do a lot more with it. So we ended up adding CI/CD originally as a separate product, but then we integrated it into one platform. We really saw a lot of emergent benefits we weren't necessarily expecting. And then as we started to continue to kind of build out, on the other side of before you code, enterprise agile planning kind of tooling, and again, after you deploy, observability, we recently acquired a company called OpsTrace to bring even more observability into the platform. And we really believe that having one platform is the most efficient way to deliver better software faster. And that's the thing that is, becoming how you compete in every industry.
So are you finding that your customers are doing an equal mix of taking the platform as is, and how many are going and pulling out this piece and putting in quote unquote best of breed?
Sure. Yeah, so we definitely have a lot of integration with other tools, right? Best of breed tools maybe in different spaces. And so not every customer starts at the same place, right? They don't need to rip and replace tools that they already have and like to use, right? They could maybe start using, again, source code management and the other pieces of GitLab, and then slowly adopt the platform over time. What we do see is that customers that start to adopt additional stages, it actually then is in an accelerated adoption rate. And so we do think that that, again, is another proof point to this thesis on a DevOps platform having a lot of value. But that's not how everyone starts, right? Sometimes they just start with source code and then learn from there.
So you can add, the one axis would be building it out as far as capabilities. Other one would be about, say, size of code and project that you can handle. So if I start out small and then I end up having a much bigger effort, do you replace certain parts? Do you have modules you put on top of others to help you grow, or how does that work?
Sure, yeah. So it's really designed to be used by single developer or by a large enterprise customer. The difference is not across that axis, right? So even our free tier, where we're based on an open source project, GitLab, and even that tier has the entire DevOps lifecycle in it. The tools that we built on top of that are part of our open core model are the ones that enterprises need to really understand across the enterprise how is development going, get the kind of enterprise standards enforced across. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily that you use different tools, but I do think you end up using things differently depending on the scale of like you said, the scale of the project, the scale of the company that's using it. Those things really factor into how you use those tools.
So how would it work if I'm using, I'm a private cloud and you want to use your tool chain, I'm working in AWS, maybe I'm working in multi-cloud. How would you take the GitLab chain and utilize it in those scenarios?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And actually it's one of the kind of big benefits that GitLab has in the market is that we're cloud agnostic, right? We don't have a cloud that we're associated with or owned by, and we're not trying to drive compute in another cloud or our cloud, right? And so that ability to be cloud agnostic has really enabled a lot of our customers who are deploying to multiple places, some public cloud, some maybe their private cloud, right? As we see heavily regulated industries learning and understanding how public cloud and private cloud have to interrelate. Those are a lot of our customers who are going through those same questions in their organizations right now. And the nice thing is they can use the same process and the same tooling no matter what cloud they're deploying to. And they might have their developers not have to worry about that, right? Like, let's build the code that we want to build and then deploy it the way that the organization needs to deploy it.
Cool. And so now let's talk about new buzzwords. So we've got DevOps, you've got DevSecOps, you've got AIOps, you've got GitOps. So since you're GitLab, what is GitOps and how do you play in there?
Sure, yeah. So I think that's the buzz thing to do. You can create a buzzword just by putting ops on the end of it. These days,
exactly.
Right? So the idea of GitOps, I really see it as an evolution of DevOps. So I've been in the DevOps space for a long time, and I built software before we had the term DevOps. And I remember this inability to kind of easily collaborate with the operators of the software versus the developers. So I think GitOps is maybe almost a natural progression of that, to say, hey, not only are we going to be working together, we're going to use kind of the Git mentality for a lot of things, for the state of what our infrastructure should be. That should be stored in Git as well and handled in source control and made a merge request. If we want to change it, we evaluate the change and we have approval on the change and then we implement the change. The same thing we do with software, we want to do with the entire operation of the company. And so that, I think, is where GitOps comes in. And then you see a lot of folks associate GitOps and Kubernetes together, again, two pretty buzzy words. I think that really it was born out of Kubernetes, this idea that we have this elastic compute and we want to be able to describe that infrastructure as code. But I think it's a concept that can apply in many areas to say, hey, we want to really make, every process change we make is going to be just like how we make code. And that's going to enable all the security points we need, but it's also going to enable us to be able to collaborate faster.
So speaking of security, I'm learning here about software supply chain. Is that something that you have a special focus on, or?
So it is, yeah, sorry. Yes, it is. We have a number of security tools built into the platform, right? Because security, right, you mentioned DevSecOps earlier, right? That has to be part of it as well. And so we have a number of security tools. One is focused on open source and the supply chain that comes in, right? And what are the known vulnerabilities there? And what is the...
So could you just explain for people who don't know, when you say the supply chain, what does that mean in this case?
Sure, yeah. So when we say supply chain in the general, we're talking about raw materials that come in, right, from suppliers that you then add value to and ship out. And really in software, the way that software is built today, it's really no different, because most software that you see or see running in the world has a lot of what is called open source tools underneath it. These things that folks work on collaboratively together in the open, and it's available for anyone to use. And so it's very rare to find a piece of software today that doesn't have one, or more likely many, open source projects that it brings in as part of its code. And that is kind of like raw materials that comes in. And so the concern there is if someone's able to infiltrate that supply chain or find a vulnerability in that supply chain, well, now you have that, right? Because you've taken those materials in. Now it's part of your problem, right? And so that's why this big focus on understanding what comprises the software we're made up of, because that can be complex, maybe not the easiest question to answer all the time, right? We've got to answer that correctly so that we can then understand what vulnerabilities may exist given that set of items.
So as you look forward, where do you see GitLab going? What are some of the areas you're heading into? And then also, if someone was trying to think, well, do I use you? There's another company, GitHub. What is there? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're looking for this, we're probably a better choice, or this is more of our customer profile.
Sure. Yeah. So first, what are we looking at? I think this focus on software supply chain is where the whole world is kind of focused right now. The EU Commission is looking into it. The President Biden in the United States issued an executive order specifically about securing the software supply chain. So it's on everyone's mind, including politicians. So I think that'll be with us for some time until we are able to kind of standardize and work as an industry to find the right way to solve some of those problems. I also think that observability is something that maybe is even still in its infancy. It's something we've been talking about as an organization or as a industry for a long time. But I think we're going to see more giving context to what we can observe about how the software is acting in the real world, and bringing that context back into a platform where we can understand the impact that developers are having by their changes. So I think those are the two things I'm really looking at going forward, or at least in the short term. And then as far as GitLab or GitHub, typically the way we grew into a DevOps platform is we had customers in the enterprise that needed that, and so there was really pretty big difference for a while that we kind of went wide on DevOps while they went really deep on source code management and being the home of open source. Now they've added since then some other tooling that is in the security space and these other ways, and so I think that proves to us just even more the theory that a DevOps platform is how you're going to deliver software going forward. And of course, we could feature compare them, but I think GitHub and GitHub.com is the home of open source. Like that's, I think, indisputed. I think a more typical customer for us might want not to host in the cloud, or they might want to use our GitLab.com, but they might want to host it themselves, right? And so we have a lot of large enterprises or folks with a lot of regulation placed on them for one reason or other that need to run it themselves in a private cloud or even disconnected from the public internet. And so that's where we see a lot of growth and a lot of customers that are starting to realize that benefit. Hey, once we have this, we can do so much more, and we can again do that all in a disconnected world.
Cool. And then just to end with, if we zoom out, and I'm looking to get into the DevOps space, my company, I want to lead an effort to do that. What are some of the things you think people should keep in mind, the key things, maybe the key things they should focus on and key things they should avoid?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think DevOps has been around for, 15 years now, maybe a little less, and I think we're still all learning together what it means. And so I think it's key to plan on to be learning all of the time, step one. And then step two, I think, is to remember that while it may be a job title somewhere, it is definitely more than a job title. It's about a process, and it's about bringing people together, and those two things are typically much harder than software, but a lot of times as engineers, we like to focus on the software first, and hey, what's the tool I'm going to use, and da-da-da.
Technical gravity is how I heard it described.
Technical gravity, I like that. So I would say, again, if someone's getting into it, I think you're going to see yourself have a lot more impact that you want to have, either on your own personal growth or on the growth of your organization, if you are able to kind of remember people, process, then software in that order.
Cool. Brendan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.